It is my honor to introduce my esteemed judges for this session, Dr. Aluwalia sir, Dr. Nand Kishore sir, Dr. Rajan Gupta sir. Sir, we would like to start the session. Dr. Mona Lisa, are you ready with your slides?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, start slide sharing. Yeah, we can see you, Dr. Mona Lisa. Start sharing.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, you can start off with your presentation. Your slides are visible and you're audible as well. Karanji, timer, please.
करण जी 6 मिनट का टाइमर लगा देना.
SP number also?
Yes. Dr. Mona Lisa, kindly mention your number.
Number which what number?
Your free paper
Free paper
number.
It doesn't matter. We'll see that later. Let her carry on. Let's not disturb her.
Okay, sir.
Please start.
Good morning to all my respected judges. I'm Dr. Mona Lisa. Today I'm going to present a comparative study of topical with local infiltration versus perivalvular anesthesia in the manual small incision cataract surgery. First of all, I would like to say I have no financial disclosure or the conflicts of interest with the presented material in this presentation. As we all know that cataract surgery is one of the most frequent successful operations in the world today, it is known to be the most cost-effective of all surgical procedures and has become the most common surgical procedure in ophthalmology. An uneventful cataract surgery is the aim of every eye surgeon. A perfectly done surgery may bless a person with good sight, and a complicated one may render him visually handicapped. Akinesia and anesthesia during intraocular surgery are prerequisites for good anesthesia. An ideal anesthetic should permit painless surgery without any systemic or local complications. It should facilitate a comfortable procedure for the surgeon as well. To accomplish this successfully, a good anesthesia is much for such an event. There are two options for anesthesia for cataract surgery: general anesthesia and local anesthesia in the form of topical and infiltration. The blind incision of a needle with infiltration anesthesia has never been completely free from sight and life-threatening complications like brainstem anesthesia, globe perforation, optic nerve injury, etc. To avoid these complications, needle-free procedures such as substitution and topical anesthesia were developed. The aim and objective of my study is to compare the safety and the efficacy in terms of pain, surgeon satisfaction, and anesthesia-related complications following topical with local infiltration versus perivalvular anesthesia for manual small incision cataract surgery with posterior chamber intraocular lens implantation. It is a non-randomized controlled clinical trial study conducted in the Department of Ophthalmology Rooms Impal for a period of 2 years in the patients with S-related cataract attending rings IOPD. Patients who have signed an informed consent and all the patients undergoing manual small incision cataract surgery for senile cataract were included in the study. And those who are sensitive to xylocaine, inability to understand the visual analog and scale, inability to understand and comply with the verbal commands, patients who are present or the past history of the uveitis, past history of significant eye trauma, or any patients having complicated cataract were excluded from the study. Coming to the methodology, after taking the proposed informed consent, patients were allotted into two groups. Group 1 underwent manual small incision cataract surgery with posterior chamber intraocular lens implantation under peripheral anesthesia, and the Group 2 under topical anesthesia with local subconjunctival infiltration. As we all know that the lignocaine 2% with adrenaline 1:2 to lag, and the 0.5% bupivacaine was used, and hyaluronidase 1500 international unit was dissolved in the 50 ml of 2% lignocaine with adrenaline, resulting in the 50 international unit ml of anesthetic mixture. First is the technique for the perivalvular anesthesia. 6 ml of that 50 international unit per ml of the anesthetic solution, and the 4 ml of 0.5% bupivacaine was drawn and injected at the junction of the middle 2/3 and the lateral 1/3 of the lower orbital margin, with the needle directed towards the floor of the orbit. With gentle aspiration, about 4 to 5 ml of the anesthetic mixture was injected. A supplementary injection of about 3 to 4 ml was given at the supraorbital notch if required. And after that, the eyelid was closed and the pressure applied to the eyeball intermittently. And the topical comes to topical anesthesia after putting 1 to 2 drops of the 0.5% proparacan hydrochloride solution. Lignocaine 2% gel was instilled in the superior and the inferior cornices and on the corneal surface twice at 5 minutes interval within 10 minutes prior to surgery, allowing the anesthetic solution to part. And after that, the eye was washed thoroughly with ASS solution on the operating table before starting the surgery, and the locus of contemptible infiltration of the 1 ml of the 2% lignocaine with adrenaline was injected for giving sterile incision. This is how we give the topical. First picture shows how we after proparacan hydrochloride solution, and the second picture shows how we put the lignocaine gel on the superior and the inferior cornices. Then see this is the picture showing how we inject the subcontemptible infiltration. And all the surgeries were performed by a single experienced surgeon, and after each surgery, the surgeon evaluated the experience, and the patient was asked to for pain during the surgery using a subjective breath scaling, which is done as follows. No pain or mild discomfort is graded as 0, mild pain, moderate pain, severe pain, and intense pain is graded as 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. Coming to the results, the first table shows the distribution of the anesthesia among during administration of the anesthetics. Here in the peripalpal groups, about 76.5% experienced mild pain, and in the topical groups, 96.1% shows no pain and no sensation. This table number 2 shows the distribution of the intraoperative anesthesia among the study groups. Here, 82.4% in the peripheral group shows no pain and no sensation, while in the topical group, 68.6% shows no pain and no sensation. The table number 3 and the table number 4 shows the distribution of the chemosis and the subconjunctival hemorrhage. Here in the here shows that this chemosis and the subconjunctival hemorrhage is exclusively seen only in the peripalpal group. Table number 5 shows the distribution of the akinesia during surgery. Here 84% in the peripalpal group shows no movement, and in the topical group 70.6% shows partial movement, and 21 shows full movement. Here, table number 6 shows the distribution of the anesthetic-related intraoperative difficulties as judged by the surgeon. Here in the topical group, 80.4 shows moderate difficulty, while in the peripalpal group, 90.2% shows none to slight difficulty. Coming to the discussion, in our study, pain during the administration of the anesthesia in the group 1 was mild in 76.5%, and the moderate in 18.6%. In groups 2, 96 to 1.1% patient experienced no pain, which is consistent with the observation of the Butt MA et al. Studies. 82.4% patients in the group 1 and 8.6% in the group 2 had no pain during surgery, which is consistent with the Butt MA. Sorry, I can complete in the given time.
Over to the judges for questions.
Do we have questions for this? I thought.
Sir, yes, sir. We have 2 minutes of discussion, question and
Okay, Dr. Mona Lisa, all
Yes,
the
sir.
patients that were operated, was it the
Currently
first
timer.
eye, or did you include patients whose second eye also was getting operated? Because the experience is different between the first eye surgery and the second eye surgery. That can identify your results.
Sir, we consider only the first eye only, sir. We did only one eye, sir.
Okay, and basically you were comparing perivalvular with the subtenuous.
Yes, perivalvular with topical with the subconjunctival infiltration, sir, before giving the scleral incision.
Okay, because your chart said perivalvular and topical.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So,
what is different in your paper from papers which are already there? I think this is quite an established fact.
yeah.
And second thing was, do you always give near the superior orbital notch? Because we see if there is no movement of the eye, then we normally don't give, because
sir, yes, sir. First, usually we give in the inferior orbital margin, but if required, we give in the supraorbital notch, sir, supraorbital region, sir. Not all the time, but if required in some patients, sir.
Thank you.
All right, if no more questions and comments, Priyam, can we go on to the next speaker, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. So the next speaker that we have is Dr. Ashok Nanda, sir. Sir, your slides are visible. You're audible as well, sir. Over to you, sir.
So could you please unmute yourself? You're still on mute, sir.
नंदा सर एक बार अनम्यूट कर लीजिए सर यू आर अगेन म्यूटेड
Please unmute.
I had unmuted, somehow it got muted again.
That's fine.
Okay. So we know that steroid is the gold standard in treatment of ocular inflammation, but with newer NSAIDs and newer surgical technique, the question arises, is steroid a must after uncomplicated cataract surgery? Yeah, it started. So for the control of intraocular inflammation, NSAIDs are being preferred nowadays because of lower risk of adverse effect to the NSAIDs and more specific anti-inflammatory effect. Not much literature are available about the efficacy of newer NSAIDs like preservative-free ketorolac 0.45% and nepafenac 0.3%, and no published literature is available on these medications on Indian eyes. So we planned this NSAIDs in controlling inflammation, to look into their safety and tolerance, and also to see if they prevented posterior segment inflammation by reducing CME by ST OCT. So it is a prospective randomized single-arm study to compare the efficacy between prednisolone acetate, bromophenac 0.07%, ketorolac 0.45%, nepafenac in two concentration 0.1 and 0.3%. All patients who underwent uneventful phacoemulsification by a single surgeon were included. Evidence of diabetic retinopathy, macular disease, uveitis, known allergy to test drug, and patients whose CDE was more than 20 were excluded. All patients underwent a baseline evaluation of best-corrected visual acuity, IOP, macular thickness by OCT, and again they were checked up on 1 week and 6 weeks follow-up. Drug discomfort score, ocular pain score, conjunctival hyperemia score, and cells in the antechamber score was also evaluated. For the purpose of the study, all the parameters of inflammations were recorded in a standard quantifiable scoring system. We empaneled about 500 patients for surgery and 100 patients were allocated randomly to each group. 470 people completed 6 weeks of follow-up. Their data was collected and analyzed. The baseline parameters of all the groups were almost similar. When we analyze the drug discomfort score, almost all patients had comfort to the drug. Only 12% of ketorolac group had some amount of mild discomfort in the first week. Pain score comparison was found to be effective. All the drugs were effective in controlling pain by 1 week, and more than 90% of them were pain-free by 1 week. When you look into the conjunctival condition score, it was more in the bromophenac and nepafenac 0.1 group, which implies that these two drugs are less effective in decreasing congestion. Analyzing the antechamber inflammation, again, bromophenac 0.07% was the least effective and so significant statistically. Macular thickness was also evaluated, and in this also surprisingly, nepafenac 0.1% was also found to be less effective in controlling macular thickness increase. Of course, bromophenac was the maximum and followed by nepafenac 0.1%. The minimum effect, the minimum increase in macular thickness was with nepafenac 0.3%. The studies have revealed that on an average 10 to 25 microns of macular thickness increases, and we decided to make a special category of those where 40 microns increase was there, and bromophenac and nepafenac 0.1% were having more number of patients whose macular thickness increased by 40 microns. However, clinical CME was minimum with both the strengths of nepafenac. Best corrected visual acuity was found to be improved to more than 92% in all groups, better than 6/9. Amongst the causes where the visual acuity was reduced, which was in 3 to 7%. CME was the maximum. Nepafenac, all the NSAIDs have been found in various literature to be equally effective to steroid, but there has been no guidelines about monotherapy with NSAID. Burning, stinging, conjunctival injection, and dermatitis are commonly reported side effects. However, in our study, all the NSAIDs were effective in controlling pain, though Bromfenac scored a little less in conjunctival congestion and antechamber cells. Bromfenac was also less effective in preventing macular thickness increase, and Nepafenac 0.3% showed maximum efficacy in both 1 week and 6 weeks. Various studies have shown that clinical CME varies from 0.3 to 3.5%, and in our study it was about 2.3%. CME was lowest in both Nepafenac 0.1 and 0.3 groups, though it was not statistically significant. So to conclude, our study tested the efficacy and safety of all the 4 NSAIDs available in the market. Most of the patients tolerated the drug without any adverse effect. All of them were effective in controlling pain, inflammation. So Nepafenac 0.3% score better than prednisolone. Bromfenac was the weakest of all. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation, sir. Over to the judges for questions.
Ashok,
Yes, sir.
during the presentation, I saw one of the slides which shows the macular thickness was more in NSAIDs, especially Nepafenac and Bromfenac.
Yes, sir.
So how does it work? It doesn't seem to be, correlating with the clinical parameters.
No, actually, we compared with prednisolone. So in comparison to prednisolone, was more, and Nepafenac 0.1%. But I also said that clinical CME, where the macular thickness increase correlated with decreased visual function, was not there in both the Nepafenac groups. But yes, when I looked into the thickness increase, the maximum increase was in Bromfenac group, followed by Nepafenac 0.1%, followed by Ketorolac, followed by prednisolone, and least with Nepafenac 0.3%.
Okay, because this is the only real objective parameter.
Yes.
And in that objective parameter, we see that it's not that effective. So that is why I asked this question.
So I term that as subclinical CME, not actual CME. That's why 40 microns is probably not causing CME, which is significant to decrease vision.
Where you saw clinical CME,
Yes.
which was better, prednisolone or Nepafenac?
Nepafenac 0.3% was significantly better with p-value 0.003.
And the second thing was all these NSAIDs are known to cause quite a significant corneal toxicity over a long period. Did you find any of that?
No, sir. They were found to be effective, safe till 6 weeks. I have put them on 6 weeks therapy. Not a single person. I think only one person in Ketorolac group opted out. Otherwise, all of them completed the course.
Thank you, Dr. Nanda.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir, we come to the end of cataract session 5 for free papers because Dr. Amar Pujari sir is not available on phone as well. So, sir, we'll move on to the semi-finalists, presentations by the semi-finalists for cataract session 1. So, Dr. Nidhi, are you here? Dr. Nidhi Gajendra Ghatkar. Dr. Nidhi, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Dr. Nidhi, please switch on your video and unmute yourself. Okay, if she's not there, let's go ahead with Dr.
Okay,
Meenu.
so we can go with Dr. Meenu.
Hello.
Yeah, you're audible and visible. Kindly start sharing your slides, please.
Okay, thank you.
You can start off with your presentation, Dr. Meenu.
Shall I start?
Please do start.
Please start.
Okay. Good morning. My paper is on multifocal intraocular lens implantation in pediatric eyes. Why this study? There are only limited studies about multifocal IOL implantation in children. The accurate IOL power calculation is difficult, and there is high risk of postoperative inflammation, posterior capsular opacification, and secondary glaucoma in this age group. So the aim is to study the merits and demerits of implanting a multifocal IOL, to analyze the visual improvement, behavior of lens inside the eye, reaction of eye after surgery, and possible complications, and to assess the visual performance of the child and the quality of life. 21 eyes of 14 patients in the age group of 1 to 14 years were studied. No IOL is implanted in less than 1 year in our institution. IOL power calculation is done either by immersion ultrasound biometry with SRK2 formula or optical biometry with the Barrett's Universal 2 formula. In children of 5 years and elder, the biometry-derived IOL power is implanted, and in less than 5 years, it is undercorrected by 10%. The average follow-up period was 11 months post-surgery, and part-time occlusion was done in all cases. Data analyzed were visual acuity, near vision, contrast sensitivity, and stereopsis were done only in verbal children, slit lamp examination for IOL positioning, IOL glistening, fundus examination, and IOP. A questionnaire to assess the quality of life after cataract surgery were prepared based on modified Cardiff visual ability questionnaire. It were answered by parents, and it could assess the quality of life of even 1-year-old child. Coming to the procedure, after anterior and posterior capsular access, a single piece hydrophobic multifocal IOL is inserted between the 2 leaves of the capsular access. Coming to results, 21 eyes of 14 patients, out of which 7 were bilateral. Average axial length was 22.53 mm. Secondary IOL implantation was done in 3 cases. Average multifocal IOL power was 23.07 diopter. No retina pathology were noted in any of the patients. Post-op uncorrected visual acuity for distance and near improved in 100% of eyes. The average Logmar uncorrected visual acuity for distance was 0.3 and for near was 0.38. The Logmar mean of pre-op distant vision was 0.8 and that of post-op distant vision was 0.3, and the difference was statistically significant. The Logmar mean of pre-op near vision was 0.5 and that of post-op near vision was 0.3. Again, the difference was statistically significant. 66.7% had post-surgery uncorrected distant visual acuity of 612 or better. 73.3% had uncorrected near visual acuity of N8 or better. Rest had less improvement because of amblyopia in our study. No correlation of visual improvement with age was noted in our study. The average post-surgery contrast sensitivity was 1.5. Stereopsis attained in all verbal children. No IOL degeneration was noted, and the quality of life was excellent. Post-op complications. 42.8% had transient rise of IOP immediate post-surgery, which became normal within 1 month post-surgery. 14.3% had visual axis opacification in spite of posterior capsular access, which may be due to inadequate anterior vitrectomy. No case of post-op uveitis in spite of not using systemic steroid were occurred, which may be due to refined techniques, intensive topical steroid coverage, and frequent monitoring. Coming to discussion, Plato et al. Study primary IOL implantation and found 75% improving to 0.3 or better. In the study by Congdon et al., primary IOL implantation with glass correction in less than 2 years were studied, and 40% improved to 0.3 or better. And he found IOL with glass correction gave better visual outcome. Infant aphakia treatment study compared IOL with glass correction versus aphakia with contact lens, and no difference in visual acuity at 1 year of age was noted, but high complication rate was associated with IOL implantation in less than 6 months of age. Our study was based on IATS results and 100% improved. Jacobi et al. Studied multifocal IOL implantation in 2 to 14 years of age, and IOL degeneration was found in 16.6% of cases. In our study, no IOL degeneration was noted, maybe because of the refined techniques we use now. A previous study in our institution in multifocal IOL in 1 to 10 years of age, the average follow-up period was 41 months, but the prevalence of amblyopia was 55.6%. In our present study, though the average follow-up was just 11 months, the prevalence of amblyopia was less. So limitations of the study was non-uniform follow-up, moderate sample size, near vision contrast sensitivity had to assess in very young children, and difficulty in extracting qualitative information from children like glare. Coming to conclusion, in pediatric group, the compliance with the spectacle or contact lens is doubtful. There is non-optimal use of bifocals. and there is high requirement of near vision for daily activities, all of which can cause amblyopia. And the treatment for this is multifocal IOL implantation, which can provide high degree of visual improvement, inbuilt amblyopia therapy, reasonable contrast sensitivity and stereopsis, and long-term postoperative complication rate appears to be nil. These are my references. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation, Dr. Meenu. Over to the judges for questions.
Very good presentation.
Thank
Did
you,
you
sir.
find any cases of anterior membrane formation or rhexis contracture, which is more common in the pediatric age group?
In the follow period, we did not find any of those, but there was posterior capsular opacification. And we concluded that it may be because of the inadequate anterior capsular, vitrectomy.
We have a question. How many of these are bilateral
7, sir.
eyes? How many are unilateral eyes? And second question is, how did you check vision in children less than 3 years, especially near vision, to conclude that it is N8, N6?
Sir, bilateral cases were 7. And we calculated, we checked the near vision only in verbal children, not in less than 3 years. Only the verbal children who can read, only in that children we check the near vision. Near vision, contrast sensitivity, and stereopsis.
Dr. Meenu, why didn't you, hello?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Yeah, why
Yes,
didn't
sir.
you use the trifocal IOLs?
We were interested in multifocal IOLs, that's all. And in our institution, it was not used at that time.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, I think we can go on to the next speaker now.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Nidhi there?
Yeah, Dr. Nidhi has joined back again. So, Dr. Nidhi.
Please start your presentation.
Your slides are visible and you're audible, I think. Dr. Nidhi?
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are. Go ahead with the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I would be talking about comparative analysis of visual outcomes of a non-diffractive extended vision new intraocular lens. I have no financial disclosures. So standard monofocal IOLs can give good distance and corrected near vision, but poor intermediate vision. Multifocal IOLs give spectacle independence for near, but can have decreased contrast sensitivity and photic phenomena. With the arising need for better intermediate vision, extended depth of focus IOLs have been introduced, but they can also be associated with photic phenomena. The Eyhance ICB00 IOL by Johnson & Johnson Vision Care is a newly developed monofocal IOL. It has same features as the pre-existing ZCB00 IOL by the same company and is visually indistinguishable. Now, the Technis ZCB00 IOL is a single-piece 6 mm biconvex hydrophobic acrylic monofocal IOL. It has an aspheric anterior surface and a negative spherical aberration of 0.27 micron. It has a frosted continuous 360-degree posterior square edge. Additionally, the new ICB00 has a modified aspheric anterior surface of the optic, which creates a continuous power profile and aims at improving vision for intermediate tasks compared with the standard monofocal IOL and extend the depth of focus. It is based on the refractive technology without diffractive rings and without zones. So the purpose was to compare this new non-diffractive extended vision IOL with the standard monofocal IOL. The outcome measures at 90 days were uncorrected distance, intermediate and near visual outcomes, contrast sensitivity, uniocular defocus curve, spectacle independence, and dysphotopsia profile. It was a prospective, non-randomized comparative study by a single surgeon at a tertiary care hospital. The data was analyzed by SPSS software. We had two groups of 50 patients each. Group 1 was implanted with ICB00 and the group 2 with ZCB00. Inclusion criteria: age 50 to 75 years, corneal astigmatism equal to or less than 0.75 diopters, endothelial cell count more than 2000 cells per millimeter square. IOL was implanted between 20 to 23.5 diopter and in the bag. Cases excluded were history of previous trauma or intraocular surgery, irregular astigmatism, corneal dystrophy or scar, history of any glaucoma, intraocular inflammation, macular disease or retinopathy, neuroophthalmic diseases, or any intra or postoperative complications. The results, the uncorrected distance, intermediate and near visual acuity was measured and calculated, and the group statistics and t-test for equality of means for uncorrected distance visual acuity and uncorrected near visual acuity showed comparable results between the two groups. While for uncorrected intermediate visual acuity at 60 centimeter, group 1 performed significantly better. The contrast sensitivity was calculated in photopic and mesopic condition at 7 and 90 days for both the groups. And it was found that with increased spatial frequency, the MTF scores were decreasing in both the groups. However, it was found that in photopic and mesopic condition, there was no statistical difference between both the groups at 7 and 90 days. Comparison of monoocular defocus curve between the two groups, it was found that in group 1 at -1, -1.5 and -2, the defocus curve was significantly better. This is a graph line chart with error bar for monoocular defocus curve showing that the group 1 has significantly better vision at divergences of 1, 1.5 and 2, and it was non-significant at -2.5 diopters. The spectacle independence for intermediate distance was better for group 1, and the difference was statistically significant. Again, intermediate activity score was done for computer work, walking downstairs, reading labels, and night driving, and it was found that the group 1 performed significantly better. Looking at the dysphotopsia profile, both group 1 and group 2 patients were highly satisfied in the intermediate nighttime activities, and both groups had comparable halos and glare during night drive. So earlier when we presented the study, there were not sufficient reports to compare our study results. With the recently published studies, our study shows comparable results for better uncorrected intermediate distance visual acuities, broader defocus curve, and more spectacle independence for intermediate distance activities for the ICB00 versus the ZCB00 IOL. A study by Offart et al. Showed similar comparable photic phenomena and contrast functions in both the IOLs, which was similar to our study. One study by Vega et al. Showed that in 2 mm pupils, the ICB00 IOL had lower MTF scores, but comparable MTF scores at pupils more than 3.5 mm. The difference, however, was not significant in our study. To conclude, implantation of non-diffractive extended vision IOL provided an extended range of vision and low incidence of unwanted photic phenomena. The Eyhance ICB00 IOLs gave spectacle independence for intermediate distance with good visual acuity and optical quality for distance as well. These are my references. Thank you.
Lovely presentation. Over to the judges for questions.
One small question is, you showed the intermediate comfort is, so how do you say that? If the intermediate lens is equal in both, then what does this extended vision lens actually give the patient?
So the intermediate was more comfortable for the group 1, was comfortable for the ICB00.
But your slide, the penultimate slide showed intermediate quality comfort is equal in both, almost equal in both.
No, sir. So
slide and go one slide before.
Yes.
Basically, the intermediate vision, she said, was better in group 1.
Yeah, if it is better in both, then what does the extended vision lens really offer?
No, it is significantly better in the group 1, sir.
Okay, that's fine. You showed the table. That's okay. Can you go down before
Dr. Nidhi, would you reserve this lens for people with some specific occupations, or you offer it to everybody?
Actually, so intermediate distance visual acuity is it is required by everyone. Nowadays, using computers, most of the people they do require it, and even in little low socioeconomic classes as well, good intermediate distance many times they do not require near vision, and they are comfortable with that. So it can be suggested to both the straight or
Okay, Dr. Nidhi, did you get any support from the company for this, financial or in the matter of lenses or something?
No, sir. No
What
financial.
is the price difference between the two lenses?
Sorry, sir.
What is the price difference between the two lenses?
So the price difference, I think, is around 8 to 10,000. I think so.
It is around 3,000 rupees between these two lenses, sir. Around 6,000 for the single vision, and then this lens which is extended is around 8,000 rupees.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nidhi.
Thank you.
We'll go on to the next speaker now, please.
The next speaker, she's a semi-finalist from Cataract Session 2 for free papers, Dr. Swati Agarwal, ma'am. Ma'am, your slides are visible and you're audible as well.
Good morning, everyone. Comparison of the clinical outcomes between image-guided system versus the smartphone digital reference marker app for toric intraocular lens implantation in cataract surgery. No financial interest. The accuracy of the toric IOLs depends on the following factors like appropriate patient selection, accuracy of the biometry and keratometry, the calculator being used, accuracy of the preoperative reference markings, that the IOL placement in the capsular bag, the rotational stability of the IOL. Now, smartphone toric apps like the iToric or the Toricam are available online, and the Varian guidance delivers better outcomes than the slit lamp assisted and the conventional manual ink marking techniques in terms of induced astigmatism. This has been proved in many studies earlier. So in this study, we aim to compare between the Varian image-guided system and the iToric smartphone digital marker reference app, the clinical outcomes with respect to uncorrected distance visual acuity, residual astigmatism, and the deviation from the target residual astigmatism. To our knowledge, there has been no previous published studies or reports of this. So this was a prospective randomized clinical study conducted at the Tertiary Eye Care Center. The sample size for the smartphone group was 10 and for the Varian group was 13. To reduce the confounding factor variables, detailed slit lamp evaluation, topography, and OCT was done for every patient. Patients with any kind of ocular surface disorders or corneal retinal pathologies, irregular astigmatism, or any other kind of eye problems were not included in the study. Keratometry was performed on multiple devices. Integrated K reading was taken into calculation wherever there was a discrepancy in K readings between the devices. And biometry was performed by immersion method, and Barrett's online direct calculator was used. So to reduce any IOL-related confounding factors like rotational stability, Acrysof IQ toric platform T3 to T9 was used in all the cases. No rotation was encountered in our study. The surgeries were performed by a single surgeon and no intraoperative complication was encountered. So this is how we've done the smartphone axis marking. So by taking into account the gyroscopic assisted camera rotation, we get the effective mark rotation from the 0 to 180 degrees, and thereafter the Mendes ring can be accordingly aligned. For the Varian image guided group, this automatically corrects for the cyclotorsion by recognizing the scleral vessels and the iris and limbal landmarks as shown in the pictures. So in this study, we've used the uncorrected distance visual acuity, best corrected distance visual acuity, residual astigmatism, and deviation from the target residual astigmatism as a measure of the clinical outcome of toric IOL surgery. The data of these were entered in the Microsoft Excel, and using the software, mean and standard deviation was calculated for the different samples, and unequal variance or independent unpaired t-test was done to analyze for any significant difference between the two groups. So these were the Excel sheets, and post-operative uncorrected distance visual acuity in both the groups were 6/9 or logMAR 0.18 and better. So this was how this shows the data being tabulated for both the groups, and the t-values were calculated Of special mention here is that the mean of the deviation of the residual astigmatism from the target anticipated astigmatism is the best evaluation for the post-operative outcome. So now these t values were put to the t-test and it was found to be not significant. So our results demonstrated that there is no significant difference between the uncorrected visual acuity, best corrected visual acuity, and the deviation from the anticipated residual astigmatism in both the groups, and that using Varian over smartphone app did not lead to any significant improvement with respect to clinical outcomes. So the earlier studies demonstrated a strong agreement between the Varian and the smartphone axis marking, but assume the Varian image guided system as the gold standard for accurate alignment of the toric ions. But a considerable advantage in the design of the current study is the ability to independently evaluate and compare the clinical outcomes of the two marking systems. So the limitation of the study is that it provides results obtained by a single surgeon, though this helps eliminate surgeon variables like surgically induced astigmatism, effective lens position, surgeon-related alignment accuracy, but a multivariate evaluation should be performed in the future. So to conclude, smartphone digital reference marker apps are a cheap, consistent, easily available, reproducible way of enhancing outcomes of toric ions, but needs a lot of care, precision, and is prone to transcription errors. The Varian image guided system aims to make the process of toric ions more accurate. It enhances the surgical flow, especially in high volume centers, but due to its high cost, it may not be an economically viable option for the majority of ophthalmologists, and that there is no significant difference between the uncorrected distance visual residual astigmatism and deviation for target residual astigmatism between the two groups. These are the acknowledgements and these are the references. Thank you.
A very
Excellent
thought-provoking
presentation.
presentation, sir. Over to the
Thank you, sir.
judges.
Very nice. But is this the app that is designed by your team?
No,
Your
sir.
part of-
So in the acknowledgements, I've shown that it is by this Dr. Saurabh Patwardhan iToric app.
Yeah. So did you compare it with the manual marking? That you didn't do it in the study.
So the manual marking has already been done, and the various reports have been published in JCRS earlier and many other index journals by El Hofi et al., Weber's, Mayer et al., and many other surgeons and institutes. And they've always shown that the Varian or the digital marking system is better.
That is good. That we all know. Variant that we all know. But
they've
when I
always-
look at this digital marker, the photograph which you show, there were two blue marks on the conjunctiva in one of the photos which you showed us. So I didn't know whether it was a slit lamp marking or it was done on the table.
So the digital marking was done on the digitally. So the blue
Okay.
marks, maybe because of the blue, the Trifon blue used during the capsule staining, sir.
No, there were dots.
So I'll just go back.
Can you just put it here?
Yeah,
Just
just
show
show
that.
us.
In the meantime, other judges, they have any question they can ask.
So here,
Yes, yes. You show the picture.
yes, sir, the picture is visible.
Not this one.
The one above-
Before one, before the one before.
Oh, sir, this is the smartphone app. So we do it with the blue mark in this. So this is the technique itself needs a freehand marking done, and then we take a snap from the smartphone app, which is easily available. It has also been designed on the iPhone. We have by the Dr. Barrett, we have it there.
No. 1 second. This marking is done freehand means this is under slit lamp or just patient sitting and you show a torchlight on
Sir,
the
on
patient.
the
like
OT table, on the OT table.
patient sitting.
Torchlight. Yes, sir. It's a freehand mark.
Okay.
But then the deviation is calculated by the smartphone. And the aim of this study is to compare the outcomes, because earlier they've always compared the manual markings, the conventional manual markings
understand.
with the Varian. But this study is showing the
Yeah. Okay.
that
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll move over to the next presentation. That is by
Thank you, sir.
the semi-finalist from Cataract Free Paper Session 3, Dr. Saloni Shah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Dr. Saloni, you can start. Yeah, your slides are visible and you're audible as well. You can start with the presentation. Can we have the timer, please?
Good morning to one and all present here. I'm truly grateful to AIOC for this wonderful opportunity. The topic for my study is repeatability and agreement of the new multimodal imaging platform, Antirion, with ILMaster 700 and Lenstar 900. So biometry is measuring the various dimensions of the eye. Interrelationship between axial length, K readings, length thickness are all very crucial to determine the correct IOL power. Biometry is a field that has seen immense evolution in the last 2 decades and progressively advanced from the contact ultrasound to immersion biometry to the optical biometers that we are using currently. In our experience, the Lenstar 900 is based on a low coherence optical reflectometry, ILMaster 700 based on the swept source OCT, and a new device that has been introduced into the market, Antirion, is also based on swept source OCT. It has a wavelength of 1300 nanometers. So Antirion is an all-in-one app. It's a multimodal imaging platform that is optimized for the anterior segment. There are 4 apps that can be utilized. The cataract app takes 4 scans during one measurement and incorporates into the calculations for biometry for varied IL powers. The optimized swept source OCT technology allows for accurate measurements and visual confirmation with high resolution images even through the dense cataracts. The ability to assess the total corneal power leads to a more suitable IOL selection. So where do we stand today in our delivery of accurate results in 100% of the cases? The study objective was to compare the repeatability of ocular biometry measured in the 3 biometers and to assess the impact of repeatability of the biometry on the calculated IOL power. Materials and methods. A study involved 127 eyes of 76 patients. Ethics committee approval was obtained and informed consent taken before participation. Inclusion criteria was all patients diagnosed with cataracts. We excluded patients having media opacities, including corneal and vitreous hemorrhage, retinal pathologies like the staphyloma or CME that could alter our IOL power measurements, or any uncooperative patient. The selected patients underwent visual acuity, IOP measurement, a thorough anterior segment evaluation, fundus examination. The following patient was subjected to biometric evaluation using 3 scans on each machine. The machines were selected in random order using a table of random numbers. A single trained operator using the same illumination measured all the scans. The following 7 parameters were assessed during our study. The formula used for the IOL power calculation was Barrett Universal 2, and the IOL power for emetropia was evaluated for Technis IOL using a constant of 119.3. A thorough statistical analysis was done using the Metcal version 18.11.6. A p-value of less than 0.05 was considered to be statistically significant. The biometric parameters were presented by the median and 95% confidence interval. Repeatability was assessed using the following 3 parameters: within subject standard deviation, test-retest repeatability, and within subject coefficient of variance. The level of agreement between the 3 instruments was evaluated according to the method described by Bland and Wall. Now, results of the 76 patients, 65% were males and 34% were females. The average age of the population of the patient was 70 years. Few patients, that is 50 of the 76 patients, had both the eyes included in the study. Within subject standard deviation showed minimum variation, that is the maximum repeatability in the Lenstar. Similarly, test-retest repeatability was highest for Lenstar as compared to Antirion and the ILMaster. The repeatability of all parameters for a given device was excellent, and amongst the 3 biometers, Lenstar had the maximum repeatability. Interclass correlation showed excellent repeatability for all the parameters. Amongst the biometers, the best agreement was obtained for the axial length and the least for white to white. Comparison of IOL powers. The IOL power differed statistically between the 3 devices, that is p-value of less than 0.05, but the difference was clinically insignificant as the difference in IOL power was less than 0.5 diopters. The precision of biometry and the calculation of IL power is necessary in the armamentarium of modern-day cataract surgery. Our study showed that axial length was as follows, bringing the difference in the mean to less than 0.1 mm, which produced a clinically insignificant change in the IL power calculation. So validation of a new machine against a gold standard helps us to establish the usage as a standalone machine, and also the repeatability ensures that we understand the extent to which the repeatability of the measurements can be attributed to the machine error. It also provides us with a normative data that ensures a robust data set to compare in the future day. So we already 900 and Lenstar was the optical parameters which are already present, and Antirion is a new addition. Thus, repeatability of Antirion was excellent and compared favorably with ILMaster and Lenstar. However, the agreement between the IL power measurement was inferior for Antirion, but clinically insignificant. For the future work, we can use the Antirion for the ICL workup and the metric analysis, and the studies to validate corneal topographic measurements using Antirion can also be done. Thank you.
Over to
Saloni, it
the
was an excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to know, like, how is the penetration with Antirion? Is it comparable to IOL Master 700 or, immersion biometry?
Yes, sir.
What do you
So,
say?
yeah, so the immersion, as we all know, gives us the best results. But IOL Master 700 has reached a maximum point. But even in Antirion, we compared the penetration. It was as good as the IOL Master because we can actually see the image that is present in the cross-sectional study and the cross-section of the image. And the penetration to the 3 mature cataracts that we had was excellent.
So if you look at hard cataracts, like how many percentage or mature cataracts it picks up in our dense PSCC Antirion compared to, IOL Master 700?
So it was as good as the IOL Master 700. Over and above that, the 3 mature cataracts that we had, the IOL Master could not pick up, but in the Antirion, we could get the measurements.
Does Antirion give any aberration errors because it is also mentioned as a tomography device?
Yes, sir. It gives us the aberrations, it gives us the topography, the tomography, and the matrix analysis, everything.
Okay.
So it can be used as a refractive and a cataract procedure. So for people, it becomes a one-stop solution.
Okay. Okay.
How does it compare in price with the other machines?
So the price is significantly high because it becomes an all-in-one machine, maybe 2 times more.
I don't think it is in the market as yet, right? Commercial market, Antirion.
I'm not exactly sure about the market, but in the institute, we had it available in the 2 institutes in Bangalore. I'm not sure whether it's available for the general market. I'm not sure about it.
If there are no more questions, you can go to the next speaker.
Okay. So, sir, we come to the last presentation for this semi-final session. The semi-finalist, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, sir. Sir, your slides are visible and you're audible also.
Good morning, chairpersons, judges, and dear friends. My research topic is saving needle microcapsulotomy, new technique to avoid Argentinian flag sign in infant and mature white cataracts. The authors had no financial interest in the subject matter of this presentation. We know that Argentinian flag sign is a self-propagating radial extension of the anterior capsular tear, which typically arises instantly after an initial prick with a hypodermic needle or the rhexis forceps. This was first reported by Daniel Perronet in 2000, and Perronet described it to be the sequelae of a raised interlenticular pressure, the only factor responsible for the propagation of the initial prick into radial capsular tear. Based on this theory, several techniques were described to neutralize the raised interlenticular pressure, including the small needle aspiration technique, which involves pricking and simultaneous aspiration of the liquefied lens matter to decompress the bag with a sharp hypodermic needle. But peripheral extension of the capsular tear has still been frequently seen instantly after pricking the anterior capsule, even before initiating the aspiration of liquid cortex. The incidence was found around 3.85 to 28.3%, but what is important is tear extension into the posterior capsule and transforming into the posterior capsular tear was found very high, into 70-24% of the cases, which could result into vitreous loss, lens material drop, and capsular support loss. So the question arises, why despite many innovative techniques, the problem of radial extension of the capsular tear continues to be challenged in intumescent white cataract? It means there had to be some other factor responsible which assists the raised interlenticular pressure to propagate the splitting of capsular tear after the initial pick. So on retrospective examination of the surgical videos where Argentinian flag sign was noted, we found that in reality, it's not the raised interlenticular pressure, the only factor responsible for the extension of the tear. It is the configuration of the initial prick created to open the anterior capsule by the sharp tip hypodermic needle or the Raxis forceps. Because if you look at the puncturing the anterior capsule with ultra-sharp beveled hypodermic needle, cystotome or sharp tip Raxis forceps, it results into a small linear cut with open edges along the entry of the needle. Raised interlenticular pressure with volcanic eruption of the interlenticular fluid, it triggers a disruptive force along the discontinuous open edges of the linear cut. And this linear cut easily opens up and is split along its open edges and rapidly radialized to the periphery, resulting into Argentinian flag sign. We also found that the tear always extended radially along the discontinuous open edges of the linear cut. It never extended perpendicular to the tear. So henceforth, we came up with a hypothesis that if we were able to manually create an opening in the anterior capsule, which had a round and regular configuration, like a capsulotomy in 2 cents instead of a linear cut, we may provide resistance against the forward thrust of the interlenticular pressure, thus preventing Argentinian flag sign. The purpose of this study is to describe an efficient new technique, saving needle microcapsulotomy, to avert Argentinian flag sign during capsular access in patients with intumescent pearly white mature cataract. What we did was we designed and developed a novel instrument, sieving needle microcapsulotome, with a smooth round pointed tip similar to sieving machine needle system to open up the tense and stretched out anterior capsule. Round pointed tip of the sieving needle machine microcapsulotome, when puncture the anterior capsule, create an opening with a smooth and round configuration without any discontinuity, allowing the liquefied lens matter to egress, thereby decompressing the bag without propagating a radial extension of the capsular tear. Round hole microcapsulotomy would act like a mini Raxis with round regular configuration to provide greater resistance against the disruptive forces generated by the high interlenticular pressure. Usually single capsulotomy is enough, but for complete evacuation of the fluid, we can make multiple punctures, and that is for the multiple fluid pockets. So to have a successful result of the sieving needle microcapsulotomy, you need to stain the anterior capsule with trypan glue, pressurize the anterior chamber with adaptive viscoelastic, and then puncture the center of the capsule. This is the sieving needle puncturing the center of the capsule, making a hole. So once you make a hole, the fluid in the interlenticular space would egress out rapidly and decompress the bag. So once the decompression is complete, you repressurize the anterior chamber and capsular axis. So this is how you finish the capsular axis. To conclude, in intumescent white cataracts, it's primarily the linear cut configuration of the initial prick has the potential to spontaneously extend along its open edges, aided by raised interlenticular pressure, leading to Argentinian flag sign. The technique of round hole sieving needle microcapsulotomy provides resistance against the disruptive force triggered by the high interlenticular pressure, thus prevent Argentinian flag sign. Thank you very much.
Very nice presentation, Dr. Rajendra.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
How many cases have you tried it in so far?
We have tried in almost 100 cases, and we have already published this. This article has already been accepted in JCRS. It's going to
the results are consistent.
Hello, yes, sir.
The results are consistent.
Results are absolutely consistent. The main important point is, see, any innovation, we have many other techniques. We do puncture-axis, you do laser capsulotomy, so many things. But then any new technique, it has to be very simple. It should be affordable. That is the most important thing. and it should be repeatable. Now, this technique uses a saving needle, which is 1 rupee saving needle. It's just 1 rupee saving needle you can use. You just bend the tip and puncture the anterior capsule. And the technique is so simple, you will not have any complication. At least if at all it doesn't work, you will never have any kind of complication with this needle. Number 2, and it's repeatable. You can very easily use this technique for all the cases and puncture the anterior capsule, evacuate the fluid, decompress the fluid. And once decompression is complete, then you can start the Raxis, and it's very easy and very safe to do the Raxis after the decompression.
Even the phaco punch was on the same principle, that it made a round opening instead of a
Which one?
The punch also makes a round opening instead of making a linear cut, but then it is not so consistent.
Which one said? Which technique?
Phaco punch. The phaco punch that we use with the phaco, once you go in with the phaco and do that initial cut.
So you call it Punchoraxis. Punchoraxis by Dr. Mohan Rajan. But you see, again, in Punchoraxis, you need a phaco machine. That is one. You need a settings. You need a proper setting. And when you go with the phaco probe inside, you do not know what will happen.
That's why it's not that consistent.
Yeah, I have done in few cases, and the whole lens came out with the initial bust. So it's very risky. Here, you are just puncturing. If it doesn't work, it will not produce any complication. That is the main important point with this technique. You will not have any complication, and it works in all the cases.
Sir, one more question, sir, please.
We still have time, Dr. Rajan. Please go ahead.
Yes.
Please stop the buzzer.
Sir, any particular thickness of sewing needle, sir?
Yes.
Because it's available in so many thickness.
Yes, Dr. Rajan. Actually, we have developed a saving needle microcapsulotome and a special device which has a 0.4 millimeter of thickness from starting at the base of the tip. The tip has to be very sharp. That is most important. But now what I have again insisting on is you can use a saving needle, a 1 rupee saving needle, bend the tip and puncture the capsule. It's so simple. You don't have to go for the device even. You can just use the saving needle only. Use saving needle, bend the tip, but it has to be good quality saving needle, steel saving needle, and the tip has to be very sharp. That is the most important thing, because if the tip is not sharp, then it will rupture the capsule. If the tip is sharp, it will puncture the capsule. So that is the main important point with this device.
Sir, how to hold the needle from the other end?
Needle, you can use a locking forceps. The lock forceps which you use for the holding the conjunctiva in a lock forceps. So you hold the needle with the lock forceps and then you can use. Otherwise, if you are not comfortable with the sieving needle itself, then you can use our device, sieving needle microcapsulotome. That is a well-made device and beautiful device.
Dr. Priyam, can you ask all the presenters to come on video so that a picture can be taken?
Oh, yes, sir. So, Dr. Manisha, Mona Lisa, I'm very sorry. Dr. Mona Lisa? Dr. Nidhi, I'm afraid, is in another session. So she has left, sir. Dr. Ashok Nanda, sir?
Dr. Meenu?
Dr. Meenu, Dr. Swati Agarwal ma'am is here. Dr. Saloni? Arpi sir is already here. Yeah. So, Nikhil, can we have a nice screenshot, please?
Yes, ma'am. Can we have all the cameras on, please? Dr. Dhaneshri is also joined in from the next session.
Yeah, Dr. Mona Lisa is also here.
Yeah, wonderful. Just 1 second. Are we all ready?
Yeah.
Better. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So with that, we come to the end of this session. A very nice session. I think all the panelists will agree it was very difficult judging the papers. It was very
exactly
to like one over the other. Very difficult job for us. And thanks to Priyam and Nikhil for all the background help. And thanks all the speakers.
In fact, the presentations were so good that we feel honored to be judges in this session.
Exactly, sir. Totally.
It was excellent presentations, all much above standard.
So,
Very,
sir,
very
requesting all the judges to kindly fill in the mark sheet, put their signatures with the date and send on the WhatsApp number. And for information to everyone out here, so one paper from these 7 papers would be going for the Colonel Rangachari session from cataract.
Okay.
Dr. Venkatraman, Dr. Rajan, and Dr. Ahluwalia, nice to be with all 3 of you.
Thank
It
you,
was a
sir. It
pleasure
was
being
nice.
with you.
Same
Thank
here.
you.
Thanks for the